often ask me, as a skeptic, if I celebrate Christmas. And I say sure. Well, not because of the baby Jesus, but then again, most Christmas traditions have nothing to do with the baby Jesus. Take the Christmas tree, for example. Centuries before the Christ child was supposedly born, many cultures brought evergreen trees into their homes for decoration in the month of December to celebrate the arrival of the winter solstice and to ask their various pagan gods for a bountiful harvest the following season. The practice continued in various forms throughout the ages. The ancient Egyptians honored their sun god Ra with palm leaves and evergreen trees. The early Romans decorated their homes and temples with evergreen boughs as part of a pagan festival called Saturnalia, the festival of Saturn, the god of agriculture. The Vikings of Scandinavia believed that evergreens were the special plant of their god Balder, and they would burn Yule logs and feast until the last ember burned out. The actual Christian tradition of the Christmas tree began as late as the 16th century in Germany, and Christmas trees were still seen as pagan symbols throughout the U.S. until the 1840s. The winter solstice, not the baby Jesus, most likely accounts for the selection of December 25th as Christmas Day. Late December was when the day started to become noticeably longer and the sun ceased its movement to the south. So the winter solstice was celebrated for the birth of the sun. It just wasn't the sun most religious people have in mind. And you might be surprised that America didn't even declare Christmas Day a national holiday until June 26, 1870. The exchanging of gifts, pagan in origin, stemming back to the festival of Saturnalia, and originally banned for that reason by the Catholic Church in the Middle Ages. Christmas carols? They trace back to the Middle Ages as well, not as religious songs, but as common folk songs sung during harvest festivals, and were only later integrated into worship by religious figures like Martin Luther. Mistletoe is a happy Christmas tradition, but few realize that mistletoe was once considered a mysterious, magical plant by the Druids and the Greeks, a pagan symbol of life and fertility. In Scandinavia, mistletoe was considered the plant of peace, under which enemies could declare a truce and arguing spouses could kiss and make up. Many decry the use of the word Xmas to mark the holiday, often clamoring that we should put the Christ back into Christmas. Well, actually, Christmas. The X comes from the first letter of the Greek word for Christ. And those declaring Xmas a war on Christ are apparently confused. Of course, confusion would be understandable if you tried to follow the biblical account of the Christ child. For example, the book of Luke has Mary and Joseph living in Galilee, but Matthew has them living in Bethlehem in Judea. Matthew chapter 1 says an angel appeared to Joseph, but Luke chapter 1 says the angel appeared before Mary. And what about the three kings we hear so often about? In the book of Matthew, they were magi, astronomers, not kings. There's no mention of three anywhere, and the entire account contradicts the one in the book of Luke, which has Jesus being visited by local shepherds, not astronomers. And the miraculous virgin birth? Not so much. Matthew apparently misread the original translation from Hebrew to Greek. The Hebrew word alma doesn't mean virgin. It translates young woman of marriageable age or young maiden. What about the lineage of Jesus? Matthew has 28 generations between David and the birth of Christ. But Luke lists 41 generations. According to both Matthew and Luke, Jesus was born on or before 4 BCE during the reign of Herod the Great. But Luke said that Joseph and the pregnant Mary had to go to Bethlehem for a census by Quirinius. Well, that census took place in 6 AD, years later and after the death of Herod. And even if there was a census, it would have taken place in their local tax district, requiring no travel. And Roman tradition was to register only the men, meaning that Mary wouldn't have had to make the journey at all. Matthew says that Jesus' birth took place in a house, but the book of Luke says Jesus' birth took place in a manger because there was no room in the inn. After Jesus was born, Matthew says the family immediately fled to Egypt for several years to escape Herod's wrath. But the book of Luke has them returning immediately to Nazareth. And by the way, no ancient historian or geographer, no other source other than the Bible confirms that the city of Nazareth even existed in the 1st century AD. In fact, Jesus of Nazareth is most likely a bad translation, which means the one of the truth. And the city of Nazareth was likely named much later by the faithful or the opportunistic. The list goes on and on. Ultimately, many of the traditions of Christ's supposed birthday have absolutely nothing to do with Jesus Christ and instead came from other, earlier pagan traditions. And even if there had been a Jesus Christ, as much as I hate to break it to you, unlike the depiction on your yearly Christmas card, because he was born in the Middle East, Jesus Christ was most certainly not white. Still, I'm a fan of Christmas. I enjoy family, friends, Christmas light displays, the Christmas tree, stockings, gifts, the classic Christmas songs, hot chocolate and pumpkin pie. But like many other skeptics, I also celebrate the season knowing that those plastic nativity Jesuses are actually more real than the Jesus they represent. And as millions of Christians erect pagan symbols and practice pagan traditions while defending the Christian Savior story, it's a chance for the rest of us to simply smile warmly, offer them a cup of hot cider, and wish them a Merry, Merry Xmas.